Hello, and welcome back to A Conversation About. This week, we're going to be talking about monkey see, monkey do. And to lead us into the conversation, I want to first introduce Edwin Cortez. He is one of my oldest friends and a communication major from Texas A&M University. Hey, Edwin.
Hi, Hugo. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming on. So, what we're going to talk about today is a little experiment that I found out during the pandemic about a year ago when we were first quarantining, that I heard on a podcast, and they only mentioned it in passing, but I thought the implications of it were like seriously interesting. So, we're going to talk about an experiment, and for all legal reasons, I have to tell you guys that I cannot independently verify that if this experiment happened or not. But we came here to play, and we came here to go into a very philosophical conversation. So it doesn't necessarily matter if this experiment happened. It's really interesting, regardless. So let's play with this experiment. It's four monkeys in a room. So picture a room and a bright red ladder in the middle of the room. On top of this red ladder, there is a set of bananas and four monkeys in the room. When one of the monkeys goes up because they see this banana, and they're hungry, they go up there, the whole room floods and the monkeys get wet. So they learn very quickly, don't touch the bananas because we're all going to get wet. Well, slowly over time, the researchers pull out a monkey from the room and put a new monkey in. This new monkey, being in a new situation, sees some bananas and says, hey, I want those bananas. He goes up there, but before he can touch the bananas, the three monkeys that were previously there pull him down and beat him up because they know if they touch the bananas, they're going to get wet. And this continues. They continue pulling out monkeys and putting new ones in until there's no original monkeys left. And when they continue putting monkeys in and they reach for the bananas, they each keep pulling the monkeys down and beating them up, such that there's no original monkeys left, but they all continue this tradition of, hey, don't touch the bananas because we're going to beat you up. And they don't know the consequences. They don't know that the original monkeys got wet, and that's why they aren't allowed to touch the bananas. So I mentioned this experiment to Edwin about a couple of days ago, and I was interested to see what he thought. And I've given you a couple of days to think about it. So what's your take on it now?
In all honesty, it's very intriguing, right? To think about the fact that the original four monkeys understood that the reason they couldn't climb the ladder was because if they did, they would all get wet.
Mhm.
As each monkey became a new one, each one of them got changed. I think that the mentality stayed behind, and it caused all the monkeys to know they shouldn't do something, but not really understand why. And the biggest thing that came to mind was the fact that we're no different, right? In our world now, there's a lot of things that we do just because we know that that's what we're supposed to do, but we don't understand why. Something simple like a handshake. We know before COVID, we knew that a handshake was the standard for a hello, right? But in all honesty, besides the few stories that talk about the olden days when people would have daggers in their sleeves and people used to shake hands like this to try to get them to figure out whether or not they actually had a dagger, we really don't understand where the idea of handshakes came. Everybody has an idea, right? Or at least where they think it came, but no solid leads. We just know that that's the standard. And I don't know how you feel, so I'll bounce it back to you. But I think that the handshake is one of the things that draws my attention the most because we know it's what we have to do, but I don't know why we do it. We just do.
And I mean, to build off of that too, if you don't shake somebody's hand, that's like almost insulting, So like you mentioned in the older days, they touched forearms that eventually turned into a handshake over the years. But to make sure that the enemy or whoever they were like greeting or whatever didn't have a weapon, kind of like an Assassin's Creed kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
And it's just interesting to see how like now it's almost offensive, like, hey, you're not going to check me for a weapon, basically, if they were looking at it now. I think that's extremely interesting. If you ask somebody, why did you shake that person's hand, you would just say, well, I mean, that's what we do to say hello. That's a sign of respect. And most people probably couldn't pinpoint down where that came from. They just know they do it. one thing or another example that I thought was really interesting too was like, let's say for example, driving. So in America, we drive, on the right lane, and the driver's seat is on the left side, right? And like, our in other countries, mainly in Europe and stuff, they drive on the opposite side, or they drive on the same side, but the driver's seat is on the opposite side. And it's weird to us because we don't do that every day. But from what I understand, it's because back in the medieval days when they had jousting and stuff, they like two knights would come at each other and they would like try to hit each other with the spear. So when they invented automobiles and stuff, it was like, okay, let's get away from the middle, so we don't accidentally hit each other or something like that. But if you ask people now, it's like, oh, it's just we always drive on the right lane and the driver's always on the left. Little things like that that we can't pinpoint down, but it's just we do it so often we don't think about it.
Now that you bring that up, so here's the funny part. I've actually heard a whole different origin story for why in the UK, for example, they drive on the opposite side. So it was a royal decree that the queen herself had to have a single line of the street for herself. So the queen's carriage was always in the right side. Therefore, the peasants and commoners stayed on the left. That's where I thought that came from. Granted, it could have came from nowhere, right? I could be completely wrong, but that's what I associated it with. And I think that the fact that we know the exact same thing, but have two completely different origins is extremely interesting in the way that we think about things, right? Because then you go to the question, just to get a little bit deeper in the actual topic, why do we do the things we do in our society, right? Because I'll give you the perfect example, and I know you know this. In the Hispanic culture, going back to the handshake, certain close friends and families give each other hugs, right? But there's other cultures where if you randomly walk up to somebody's, let's say for example, you and your friend, right? And if we're close, it would be normal for me to give you a hug, and then if we're married, it would be normal for me to give your wife a hug, just like you would give my wife a hug. Mm-hmm. But to outsiders, it seems kind of odd, maybe a little weird and disrespectful. Not disrespectful, but just odd, right? Because they come from a whole different set of standards. And I think that's so interesting. And it goes back to the question, why do we do the things we do? I don't know, but I just know that that's what we do.
Yeah, because for some people it would be like an intrusion of your bubble. Like, okay, you're in my bubble, don't touch me, right? And like in some ways we have to respect that. But in some cultures it's like, oh, you didn't give me a hug. Oh, you didn't shake my hand. Okay, and that has a negative connotation with it too. Where like you said, I would absolutely like shake your hand and then give you a hug and give your wife a hug, and like I wouldn't think anything of it, and if you did it we wouldn't think anything of it because it's commonplace for us. But if you asked us where that came from, it's like I don't know, and some people would say we don't like that at all because you're stepping into my personal space.
So speaking of personal space, in communication, right, you often talk about your area of comfort, right? I don't know. Have you ever heard of the term area of comfort?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So just to break it down, the area of comfort is the area around you that gives you that space of comfort where you're like, okay, it's cool. I am perfectly comfortable in this situation. To the average American, it's a couple of feet. I cannot tell you off the top of my head what it is, but perfect comfort is me standing here, you standing a couple of feet that way, and we're perfectly fine. We're cool like that. Mm-hmm. But in Hispanic culture and Asian culture, it's a lot closer. So usually when you have those culture clashes, or you have a culture that pushes away and a culture that wants to be close, it causes that friction. And it's super interesting to watch that unfold because I saw it unfold in person, right? And I can't tell you how many times I saw where people from small towns, right, like us, for being from a small town, are used to a set of a way of being, and you have somebody from a bigger town trying to get into a new situation, and you're intermingling people from two different worlds. And we had a girl who was from the inner city, and we had another girl who was from a little tiny town just like us. And the first thing they did when they were picked as partners was talk to each other, but you could see the inner city girl get closer and closer, and the other girl slowly back up. And it goes back to those things of like personal space. Why is it that certain groups like that personal space? um I mean, what do you think?
I saw the same kind of thing when I first started working in retail, actually. I noticed when I was helping some customers, they would get like really close up to me, which I didn't mind because I'm used to that. And I noticed some like kept their space. And then I noticed some that got like really close. And I'm like, okay, that's my personal space. Like, even though I'm used to being close to people like that when I'm speaking to them, like even
Mhm.
I had a like, oh, okay, that's a little close, right? Um, and it goes back to the thing, if you ask them why, they probably wouldn't be able to tell you other than like, this is the way we've always done it. It feels natural, it feels right, so this is why we're doing it. And that's why
Mhm.
I absolutely love this little story, even if it's not true or whatever. I absolutely love it because, I mean, when you got to a set where there was like no original monkeys, you ask them, why do you not let anybody up the stairs? And it's the answer is because we never do that, we just don't do it. And it's interesting to continue to talk about like what other things came out of that. Like, what other things do we do that we probably don't have a good definition of why we do it? Another one I was thinking about that's kind of silly too, and we can jump into some deeper stuff in a minute, but one that's kind of silly is Groundhog Day. Like, they pull out a groundhog, and like display him on TV, and that's supposed to tell you if we're gonna have a longer winter or something like that. And I'm
Yeah,
sure, if you ask me, I have no idea why. I think it's silly and hilarious, but I mean, it's just something we do.
it's
And
just tradition. It
yeah,
just
the
is.
tradition. And what I want to get out of this is leaving like you and me and the viewers, people watching it, thinking about traditions in general. Like, okay, what kind of traditions do we do? Where do they come from? I mean, that's not to say like your traditions are bad, but just kind of think about like where they come from, just to kind
Mhm.
of play philosophically with these ideas.
I'll give you, I'll, philosophically, it's always a good topic to attack and talk about. But I think one of the things that I think will resonate with most people, and I'm sure it'll resonate with you, in the world of human resources, one of the biggest things that anybody worries about is their pay, right?
Mm.
Everybody, when you get a job, what's the first thing you ask? How much am I going to get paid?
Yes.
Not because we're greedy, but because it's a necessity. It's what we need to survive. Um, but and let me know, maybe it's just been my personal experience, but have you ever been told not to talk about your income?
Oh, yeah, of course. Because, okay, so naturally, we want to ask about pay because we are exchanging our time, our experience, everything about us to this company, entity, employer, whatever it may be, right? We are exchanging that for some amount of money or something. So that's always what we want to ask. So yeah, both where like in an interview you ask, how much am I going to get paid? Not necessarily upfront like that. Of course, there's ways to do it. But then after you get hired too, or like in the workplace, like it's kind of shunned down. Like they don't want you to talk about how much you get paid.
Right.
Perhaps because they don't want employees to know that others get paid more. That's probably the reason why. But interesting to see where that came from as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So one of the biggest things that I learned, even in my current career, right, that you could have two individuals with the exact same qualifications, and it just doesn't work that way. There's so many variables that dictate what the starting rate is going to be, right? We're talking about history, education, we're talking about references, things like that all affect how much you're going to get paid. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way it is. But the most interesting thing, and I was really bad about it when I worked in retail, I was nosy. I knew that it was taboo. I didn't understand why it was taboo. Okay. But I was so nosy because I wanted to know why I couldn't talk about it. Everybody was like, I'll give you a perfect personal example. I was a store manager and I managed quite a few people. And funnily enough, I was friends with the other store managers, and out of nowhere, when we had a district meeting, just out of curiosity, I asked my friends, "How much do you guys get paid?" Some of them, of course, ran bigger stores, right? And some of them had bigger clienteles, made so much more money than me. So I expected them to get paid more, except for the fact that none of them told me, not a single one. They all gave me the same response. We're not supposed to talk about pay at
But
all.
why? But
Exactly.
why?
And it brings you back to the exact same quote that I've been telling you for the last few days that we've talked about this. It just is that way.
Yeah,
It is what it
it is
is,
what it is.
right?
I remember in one of my previous jobs when I was getting interviewed and we were talking about like pay and stuff, and we weren't like necessarily, well, we were negotiating a little bit, right? And then we finally got to a price that was right for both parties.
Mhm.
And when that part of the conversation concluded, the person interviewing me was like, "And you don't need to tell the other person who I was sharing the position with, or that was my counterpart. You don't need to tell so and so how much you made." And I thought, of course, I'm not going to tell them. But inside, I thought, of course, I'm not going to tell them. But also, why? So my response was, yeah, of course, don't worry about it. I know what's right and what's wrong, right? But I mean, what's wrong about it? And that's what I kept thinking about afterwards. Like, what's so wrong? Perhaps, like you said, there's different like experiences, there's different qualifications, references, and stuff that leads me to get paid more than them. Um, or vice versa. Maybe they have way more experience and they get paid more than me. I guess it's because there's like this underlying feeling of, oh, now I don't get paid enough. But why? I think that's like a self-fulfilling circle. If you tell people to not talk about it, you kind of stigmatize it. Um, but again, but why?
I think one of the things that is often overlooked, right, is the fact that yes, things like that can be justified, the reason why you get paid. And some of those things are completely normal. It just happens. Like I said, there's justifications for it. But sadly, there's also dark and bad reasons why you get paid less, right? You have employers who have prejudice against specific people, just because maybe you're older, maybe because you're a woman, because you're a minority. They also don't want you to spread how much you get paid, because you could be getting severely underpaid,
Mhm.
and vice versa. If you're in a position of power, you could be severely overpaid.
Yeah.
And again, and sadly enough, I've been in the position where I'm like, this guy does less than I do, and somehow he's getting paid as
Yeah.
much as me. And it's an unbelievably an unfair thing, but it always bothered me. And it was the one thing I always got in trouble for. And I really did get in trouble for it, was always being nosy about how much people got paid, just because it was my curiosity. Certain businesses actually make you sign an undisclosure
Yep.
agreement
Yep.
where you can actually get in trouble for it. So, I mean, it's just things like that. Another thing that, just bothers me is, you ever heard that? I know you've heard the term of like inside voice, right? Where the concept of a perfect level of voice really came from, I don't know. Because you're a culprit of this. You tell me that I'm way too loud.
Yes.
Um, but that's because to me it sounds normal, but you tell me I'm way too loud. So what determines that, right? Why are things the way they are? And I mean, we could get a lot more, a lot more deeper into the topic. I don't know how far you want to go, but
No,
we can
let's go for
definitely.
it. Let's go for it.
I mean, you want to go for it? Is there
Let's go for
anything
it.
besides, pay? Is there any other topic that you think really affects us more than it should because we just follow it?
There's a lot of life philosophies.
Mhm,
There's a lot of ways of thinking that aren't bad, right? Um,
mhm,
but you just do them. Like, I don't know, like I'm holding a lucky $2 bill or something.
mhm,
Why? Because I'm superstitious, right? Or whatever. Where did that superstition come from? And like just break it down. Like, okay, at some point in history, someone said if you carry a special kind of currency or something, that's going to give you good luck. But now we're like just doing silly traditions like that, and have no idea where it came from. We just do it because, you know, it's been told to us, oh, this is good luck. Little things like
Mhm.
that.
Right, right. And I mean, I think that situations like that are really, really astonishing to follow, because I don't know if you've ever gotten into that deep rabbit hole that is YouTube, where you watch one video that leads to another to another, and you've spent there the entire night.
Hmm.
Um, I did the same thing with the belief over, funnily enough, over ladders and cats. How a black cat here is considered horrible bad luck. And
Yeah.
in other parts of the world, if you see a black cat, it's completely good luck. So where it comes from, I don't know. But to turn things upside down a little bit and get a little, a little bit, more into a harder topic, would be like things that we have to follow in our society, right? Things that we are just bound to follow. They come from, they have different backgrounds, whether that's religion, whether that's the era in which you're in, the geolocation. There's so many variables that dictate whether something's acceptable or not. And I'm not here to say whether something is acceptable or whether something is not acceptable, right? We're just here to debate the fact that certain things are just the way they are in certain places, right? Um, so I mean, I know there's countless examples of that all over the country. I don't know if you know any off the top of your head.
Um, yes. So I had one immediately comes to mind, and I'll
Mhm,
tell you about it in a second. But what you're
mhm,
talking about is like, yeah, we're not here to tell people what is like right or wrong, but it's super interesting to question. Okay, but why do you do that? And just, you
mhm,
know, and maybe it's because maybe me and you are just like naturally that curious and nosy, like you said. But I love to
mhm,
question, why do we do that? Why do we do that? And so
mhm,
my example is, in many cultures around the world, religions, what have you, philosophies, whatever else, right? Snakes are generally considered to be a bad thing. They are a symbol of evil or not good things. But then again, there's also cultures that think snakes are absolutely okay. And so, like, it's interesting to me, to question. Okay, but like, did someone get bitten by a snake and then have it out for all snakes, and then say, you know what, snakes are bad because that one bit me, and all snakes are bad, or something like that. Um,
mhm,
and now you say, okay, but snakes are bad. And you keep telling your friends that until like everybody knows that snakes are bad, but they don't know why.
mhm.
And actually, now that I mentioned that, rumors, and gossip immediately came to mind after I
Oh,
said that, actually. Because I could start a rumor in secret and like spread it, and like we could be believing this rumor, and no one knows where it came from.
I think it all comes down, in all honesty, I think it all comes down to the position of authority, right? If somebody important says something, I think it just becomes the norm, right? Or it becomes completely acceptable, especially if there's somebody in a position of power, whether that's political power or whether that's societal power, right? A celebrity. How many times have you seen, you know, celebrities, like, just off the top of my head, somebody like, Kim Kardashian does something and it just becomes normal. And regardless of whether it's good or bad, it just becomes accepted because she's in a position of power compared to if somebody like you did, right? I think the biggest example would be just the movement in social media and the influence that it has, right? Especially on our generation and even younger generations, right? Social media has changed so drastically. I remember when we started on Facebook, posting all of our terrible memes, compared to what it is now. Now it's full of ads, and people our age are still on Facebook, but people younger than us are no longer there because the demographics have changed so much. But there's certain things that are just part of each of those bubbles that are just accepted there, and they're there because somebody said that they should be there and that somebody should follow that specific, for lack of a better phrase, that specific rule. And some of these are unspoken rules and some of them are spoken rules. So I don't know what you think about that. or if you're catching on to my tangent.
Yes. And the whole time you were talking, I immediately thought of like going back to your UK example for why people drive on the other side of the street that I thought was, something else. And it could be either or, right? But like, how many things do we do now because some king from the medieval ages or queen from the medieval ages or from around the world, and even, whatever time, didn't like something and told their people, okay, we're not doing that. We're not gonna hug anymore because I don't like hugging, and then like that whole culture or like that whole group of people that doesn't do it and their kids don't do it and they don't tell them why, they just don't do it, and like that just like over generations gets brought down, and that's all I could think about, like how many traditions, how many things do we do that came from something kind of silly or simple like back in the day that like now we do and they take for granted, like driving on the other side of the road, whatever the reason it may be. But you're right, like people in position of power, wherever, whatever that position may be, whether it be political, like you said, religious, or just kind of like in like a family kind of setting in that position of power. Like how many traditions come from that? And I mean,
Mhm.
all I can say is like continue to question your life for the little things we do, because
Right.
it's interesting to go down that rabbit hole. At least it is for us.
You know what, and I'll give you like our personal examples. I know that as an Aggie myself, right, we have a bigger pride compared to certain other universities, but the biggest thing that I think is just it just comes down to culture. It just comes down, not the culture of like what defines you, but just what you believe in and what you understand, right? Or what you think as your own, and I know you love this term, your own universal truth, right? Well, there is no truth, right? No, there are a few universal truths. Um, I think the tradition is all it's just what has been brought down to you by society, your friends, and what you know and develop by yourself. Just like the monkeys, right? Understanding that if they climb the ladder, they were gonna get wet, right? So they learned not to do it, and they technically passed it on to the next generation. The new generation may not understand the fundamentals of why they did what they did, right? They just knew they had to stop him from going up there, even if they didn't understand why, because they thought that was what was right. And I don't think that has changed at all. We do things now that are incredibly wrong as a society, but we thought that was right long ago, and that hasn't changed now, right? And without diving deep into it, I think there's a lot of questions, and I agree with you. There's so many things, whether that's in the world of in the world of culture, religion, politics, just society in general. I think it's fair, and I think it's completely normal for us to ask why, because you and me get in trouble for it all the time. But I think the why is fundamentally the most important thing. So the real question is, do we continue to be little monkeys, right? Beating each other up, but not understanding why? Do we continue the little monkey see, monkey do mentality? Or do we question why we even have the mentality in the first place? I mean, I think those are all fundamentally good questions, but I'm a little biased because that's just how I am.
No, those are, I mean, that's it. They're those fundamental questions that we keep coming back to, like, why do we do things? Not to say that like what you're doing is bad, but at the same time, it's interesting to see why you do what you do. Like you said, your own universal, your own self belief in whatever the truths are. I think it's interesting and very good for you to know why it is you do what you do. Not, you don't necessarily have to have an answer, but it's always interesting to me when I ask, okay, why did you do that? And they like actually have a reason, or they say, oh, I don't know. Because then that gets me thinking, okay, but like, why did they do that? Whatever that thing may be. And
Mhm.
like I said, like we probably get in trouble being just nosy and curious. But it's something like I love to do. And like ever since I heard of this experiment, I thought, okay, but what do I do in my life? Like, which part of that am I? Like, am I one of the original monkeys that's like now telling people, hey, let's not do that, and then like we build some kind of weird tradition? Or am I part of the other group where we don't know why we're doing what we're doing, but we're going to do it because tradition, history says so? Most likely the latter, but we can be part of both of the groups at the same time, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
It does.
And it's just the most interesting, one of the most interesting things in the world to me to continue questioning, but why? You know,
Right.
because I saw that person do it and it looked cool. Okay, now everybody does it. And that's how
Right.
like trends happen and things like that. Like things go viral and people want to copy it. A lot of things like, for instance, like you said, Facebook, that we are probably still on it, but there a lot of the younger generation is probably on something like TikTok or something. Well, there's a everyone's heard of viral TikTok trends and things like
Mhm.
that. It's like, okay, where did that start? And also, like I mentioned earlier, like gossip. Okay, where did that start? And like, why are we spreading rumors and things like that? Or where did this rumor come from?
Mhm.
All little things that like that happens in our everyday life. It's not like far out there. Like we hear rumors, we hear gossip, we see the latest TikTok trends, or whatever it may be. Like we hear headlines on the news, and we hear silly stories. Like driving on the opposite lane in a different country, shaking hands. We do Black Friday. Every Friday after Thanksgiving, we have to do Black Friday.
We
Why?
do
You
because
know,
it's tradition.
because it's why is
Because it is
it?
the way it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I could go on about different
Mhm.
examples, but just keep thinking about that in your
Right.
everyday life. Because it's the most interesting thing. Like
Right.
understanding why you do what you do is like, to me, like at the core of your being.
I think, as a final thought, I think that you have to ask yourself one or which group of monkeys do you want to be, right? Do you want to be complicit and just follow what you have to do because you're told that's what you have to do? Or if you want to be the annoying monkey who questions everything. Sure, you might get beat up a couple times for questioning it, but you'll at least understand why it's happening, right? And I think it'll be healthy for our society, especially nowadays, for us to question why we do things we do, and also question why others do what they do.
Yeah, for good and for bad. We got to question what it is we're doing. And we're kind of running out of time. We don't want to talk too long about this because eventually we'll start running in the circles. Edwin, thank you for coming on. I love this conversation. As you know, I could sit in a car in an empty parking lot all night and talk about something like this. And I'm really genuinely interested in like what other traditions the viewers may have, my friends may have. So if you want to share that with me, I don't know if Edwin's really open to that, but like I can have conversations all night about this. So I mean, if you guys want to share something, I'd love to hear it, because traditions are just like fascinating to me. But
I, I'll
any last words?
Oh yeah, no. I just want to say I'll also take you up on that offer. If anybody is willing to debate me, then that's fine. Or willing to at least have a dialogue with me, that's perfectly fine. I think that having a different perspective is always good.
Mhm.
So while Hugo might be a little bit more, a little more happy about it, I'm a little more down to the earth and logic about it. So if you want a tougher stance, then I can help with that.
Because I like to play a lot. I love to play with
Right.
ideas. I like to go philosophically, but also me and you were debaters. We were debate partners for a couple of years in high school. So we love other people's perspectives and we love to question things. And we love to, give some rebuttals on some things. And that's what, I mean, I love communications and other people and interpersonal stuff because of that. With that
Hmm.
being said, thank you for listening, guys. This has been a conversation about monkey see, monkey do. Edwin, I will see you later. Thank you.
Thank you.